So, how do we decide which new development projects get a green light and which ones need a much closer look? Today, we're diving into the crucial first steps in environmental protection, a process of screening and examination that sorts projects for the good of the planet.
You know, before a single shovel ever hits the ground for a new highway or a power plant or even a big housing complex, there is one fundamental question that absolutely has to be answered. And there it is. That's the heart of the matter. What is this thing going to do to the air, the water, the land, and of course, the communities that live there? The entire system of environmental assessment is built just to answer this one vital question. All right, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the sheer flood of projects that need assessing. Then, we'll talk about the environmental sorting hat that helps manage them. We'll explore the middle path, the EIA, before comparing all three assessment routes. And finally, we'll tie it all together and talk about balancing progress with protecting our planet. Okay, let's start with the scale of this challenge because we are not just talking about a handful of projects here. Right? It is a constant, never-ending stream of proposals. And doing a full, multi-year environmental study on every single one, well, that would be completely impossible. It would just grind everything to a halt and waste an incredible amount of time and money on projects that barely have any impact. So, you need a system. And that system kicks off with a process called screening. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a sorting hat for development projects. It's designed to figure out exactly where each one belongs based on its potential to mess with the environment. So that's the textbook definition, but what does it really mean? Screening is that first critical filter. It's a super quick way to classify a project and decide what level of environmental study, if any, is actually needed. It's all about focusing our energy and resources where they matter most. Okay, check out this flowchart. You can see how every single project proposal enters the system right at the top. The screening process then acts like a funnel, asking all these questions about its type, its location, its scale, and based on those answers, it gets channeled into one of these three paths you see branching out: the lightest review, a medium level one, or the most intense one. It's basically a decision tree in action. So the whole point here is making sure the response fits the problem. The real genius of screening is that it makes sure a small rural road doesn't get bogged down in the same red tape as a massive hydroelectric dam. It makes the entire system actually work by matching the level of scrutiny to the level of risk. Now, let's talk about that middle path, because this is where the vast majority of projects end up. It's called the Initial Environmental Examination, or IEE. An IEE is for those projects where the environmental effects, well, they aren't totally obvious. They're probably not harmless, but they might not be severe either. The IEE is the tool we use to figure that out. It's way more than a simple checklist, but it's less than the massive undertaking of a full-blown EIA. Its one job is to answer: are the potential impacts big enough to need an even deeper study? And it's a really structured process. It kicks off with research and actually going to see the site. Then comes a super important step: talking to the local community, the people who will be most affected. From there, the team figures out the likely impacts, suggests ways to reduce any harm, and then wraps it all up in a formal report for the government to review. Now, this flowchart, this shows the whole journey. And what's really important to see here are the feedback loops. See those arrows that circle back for review or branch out for a public hearing? That tells you it's not just a straight line from A to B. It's a process with built-in checks and balances, making sure that expert findings are solid and that community voices get heard before any final decision is made. So, now that we've got a handle on screening and the IEE, let's zoom out and put all three assessment paths side by side to really see how they compare. You can think of it as a spectrum, right? On one end, you have the Brief Environmental Study, or BES. That's for projects with really small known impacts, like a little community garden. In the middle, you've got our IEE for those projects with uncertain impacts. And then all the way on the other end, the Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA, which is saved for the huge projects like a new airport that could have seriously big consequences. And this table just lays it all out perfectly. You can really see how the requirements ramp up with the potential impact. Just look at the differences. For a big EIA, you need this extra step called scoping just to define the study. The public notice has to be in a national newspaper, not just a local one. And the final sign-off comes from the top, the Ministry of Environment itself, not just the ministry pushing the project. The oversight directly matches the risk. So we've walked through all the mechanics of how this works. But let's take one last step back and ask the big question. Why do we go through all this trouble in the first place? This quote, this really nails it. This entire system isn't about stopping progress. It's about making progress smarter, more sustainable. It's a tool that lets us see problems before they happen, so we can build in solutions right from the very start. Ultimately, this whole process is our main line of defense for weaving environmental care into development. But it does leave us with a pretty critical question to think about. As our planet faces more and more pressure, are these systems we have in place strong enough to really protect it for the future? Something to consider. Thanks for watching.